The first rays of sunlight painted the island of Guadalcanal with hues of gold and crimson, casting long shadows across battered runways and nervous faces, the faces of men who knew that every morning in 1943 could become a day to remember for the rest of their lives, or the last chapter of their story. Among them stood Lieutenant James Swett, a young pilot whose fate would soon become inseparable from one of the most astonishing aerial feats of World War II. Swett's aircraft, the Curtiss P-40 Warhawk, was already idling on the tarmac as orders crackled over the radio. On paper, the Warhawk was a contradiction, a machine celebrated for its toughness, yet routinely dismissed as inferior to the svelte and deadly Japanese Zero. The P-40's sturdy build belied its lack of agility, its firepower respected, but its turning radius and overall speed left much to be desired. Most pilots understood these drawbacks intimately, and in mess hall conversations, the Warhawk sometimes became the owl, subject of dark humor, a stopgap fighter meant to hold the line until something better arrived. At that moment, however, no such replacement was looming, only the threat. Scouts and radar units had picked up a massive Japanese formation, heading straight for the Allied anchorage at Tulagi Harbor. The size of the enemy force was almost mythic. 64 planes comprised of agile Mitsubishi Zero fighters and lines of G4M Betty bombers built for destructive payload delivery. The goal was clear: cripple the fleet while it sat exposed. Drowned in the morning calm, Swett's emotions surged, a mix of fear, duty, and possibility. He climbed into the cockpit, feeling the rough metal and worn switches beneath fingers that trembled with adrenaline. Every step before takeoff was now ritual: helmet, oxygen, final checks, the unspoken prayers. As the Warhawk rolled out, the world narrowed to the canopy's glass, the pulse on his wrist, and the drone of the engine as he pulled the stick and climbed rapidly into the sky. His squadron fanned out, but Swett broke formation almost immediately. What he saw next was staggering. The enemy planes rose together, a living wall of wings and shadow, moving with precision and intent. To attack directly was, in most tactical scenarios, unwise. It was the kind of odds that taught pilots the value of withdrawal, regrouping, and waiting for a moment when numbers favored survival. But the stakes were too high, and Swett had learned that sometimes survival came from boldness rather than caution. Pushing his throttle forward, Swett dove toward the formation, guns blazing. The Warhawk's 650 caliber machine guns filled the sky with lead. The first enemy bomber trembled, smoke curled, and pieces sheared away. Japanese pilots responded instantly, weaving their Zeros into defensive positions and trying to box him in. What followed was not a single confrontation, but a series of engagements, split seconds where life hung on maneuver, courage, and the limits of his battered aircraft. Swett became a master of improvisation. Evasive turns pulled the Warhawk through clouds and sunlight, forcing his pursuers to overshoot. He exploited the aircraft's strengths, durability, and speed in a dive, using gravity to burst into the fight and then escape before the swarm could focus its deadly intent. Each pass was a risk. Every round expended had to be intentional. Through grit and tactical brilliance, Swett downed his first bomber, then a second, his action sowing confusion among the attackers. The notorious superiority of the Zero in close combat nearly claimed him when a fighter appeared out of nowhere, its cannons blazing. Glass shattered across Swett's canopy, and a fragment cut across his forehead, sending blood into one eye. Blinded momentarily, he relied on instinct, pulling his aircraft into a steep climb, twisting away from incoming fire. Swett's Warhawk shook and vibrated, damaged, hot, and running low on ammunition. But the young pilot pressed on, knowing that every shot counted and every second in the air delayed the enemy attack on the vulnerable fleet below. As the battle drew on, Swett's focus became almost transcendent. He tracked the bombers as they lined up for their runs, darting through fire as Zeros tried to close him down. Twice he nearly collided with enemy aircraft, the brutal dance of wings and bullets playing out less than meters apart. His radio crackled, his oxygen mask fogged, but still he maneuvered, shooting down bomber after bomber with a mixture of audacity and precision rarely witnessed. Below, Allied observers watched the spectacle unfold. The single P-40 weaving among enemy formations became a symbol not just of resistance, but of possibility, an underdog refusing to yield. By the time Swett exhausted his ammunition, his tally stood at 8 enemy aircraft, a mix of G4M bombers, and at least one Zero. With fuel low and his Warhawk battered and trailing smoke, Swett made a desperate run for the coast. He brought his damaged fighter down in an emergency landing near friendly forces, crawling from the wreckage with wounds, exhaustion, and a story that would soon become legend. News of the fight spread in hours. Allied leadership was stunned. Even hardened veterans found Swett's exploit difficult to comprehend. His feat became an instant morale booster, a tale of skill under fire, courage when outnumbered, and triumph born not from technological superiority, but from the indomitable human spirit. Swett was quickly recommended for the Medal of Honor, and his name echoed across newspapers and radio broadcasts. A rallying point, in a war where hope was as precious as ammunition. The impact of that morning rippled well beyond the immediate battle. Military analysts revisited their assumptions about the P-40 Warhawk. If a single, supposedly outclassed aircraft could inflict such damage, perhaps its strengths should be reconsidered in light of changing tactics. Subsequent pilot training began to emphasize adaptability, using the environment, exploiting aircraft qualities, and focusing on individual decision-making under pressure. Swett's encounter also shifted cultural perceptions. The shark-mouth-painted Warhawks, once dismissed, now represented tenacity and the capacity for transformation. Air museums acquired P-40s and retold Swett's story, not as an isolated miracle, but as evidence of what courage and ingenuity could achieve even when the odds seemed impossible. Despite the accolades, Swett himself remained clear-eyed about what had taken place. In interviews years later, he focused on the support teams, the luck involved, and the shared sacrifice of all who fought. He saw his day over Guadalcanal not as an easy victory or straightforward example of heroism, but as a testament to the unpredictable, chaotic reality faced by airmen in battle, the importance of training, the role of innovation, and the enduring presence of risk. In retrospect, the transformation was profound. Swett's audacity changed the reputation of an aircraft, challenged strategic orthodoxy, and galvanized Allied morale at a critical moment. The battle did not end the war, nor did it erase the losses and hardship that followed. But its legacy endures, a lesson in the power of adaptation, the necessity of courage, and the unpredictable outcomes that arise when individuals refuse to bow to expectation or defeat. Today, the P-40 Warhawk stands preserved in museums, its story intertwined with that of Swett. The legend is not simply that he overcame 64 enemy planes, but that in doing so, he reframed what it meant to fight, to innovate, and to believe. His day in the air above Guadalcanal is a lasting reminder that sometimes only the greatest adversity can unlock the true potential hidden in man and machine alike, a powerful legacy carried forward for generations to come.